Great. Okay, so welcome everyone. Just going to mute you all. Thanks for coming. Welcome to Migrating During a Pandemic. What were we thinking? During the next hour, I'm going to give you a background to our CMS migration project. I'm going to talk about some of the design changes we took the opportunity to introduce. Importantly, how we did the automated migration, the impact of the pandemic, and really importantly, what we've learned so far. So I hope that's all right. Just a little bit of housekeeping first. As I mentioned, cameras off if you don't want to be recorded. So we'll be recording this for Digital Leaders Week to distribute. You don't have to mute yourself. I've muted you myself. Do feel free to drop some questions in the chat bar as we go. We've got some very able and clever people from Placecube who can pick up any nasty technical questions. Otherwise, do wait to the end and we can have a good chat. And if you're in the mood to tweet, then do. The hashtag is Digital Leaders Week. But no spoken questions during the presentation, if that's okay, just so we can rattle through it and leave lots of time at the end to really cover those in some depth. Okay, are we sitting comfortably? A couple of intros. I'm Neil Lawrence. I'm the web manager at Dorset Council. I've been here since last October when someone said, why don't we move our website? So that's what we're doing. This is actually my fourth web migration. I don't know what I've done to deserve that, but that's kind of where we are. And also with me is Lorna.
Hi everyone. For those of you I don't know on the call, I'm Lorna Perry. I'm the Customer Success Manager here at Placecube. My role in this migration project has been working primarily alongside Neil and his team at Dorset, just to ensure that their outcomes and objectives are met, and to act as their advocate internally here at Placecube.
Right, and also on the call is a fly in this room, which hasn't got a label, so I don't know its name, but hopefully it won't bother us too much. Great, so to kick off, a little bit of background. I wanted to give you some context of what we were doing and why the timing of this migration was important. We've got some music on in the background somewhere. So I'm going to give you a brief history of Dorset websites. So back in the day, Dorset Council, 6 councils in the Dorset area joined together and created quite a groundbreaking website across Dorset called Dorset for You. That was generated using GOS, the platform GOS, managed by an independent team that sat outside of the 6 councils but all worked together. It's fair to say that CMS had some significant functional problems and was generally completely unloved by everyone. And it had been around for 10 years. So come March 2018, work began with Zengenti, who sell the Consensus platform, on making a new vision of a better website with better user experience. Lots of user research was done into the information architecture, which came up with a wide, not deep architecture. It used common components that could be reused across the site, focused on creating a better user journey, and it had lots and lots of custom development to create additional functionality. I think at that time there was some mad level of pages, like 20,000. They all got culled down. So a lot of work was done back then to actually make the site more user friendly. Come April 2019, can I just check you can see all 4 images on the page that I'm looking at? Can you give me a nod, Lorna? Yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay, so animation completely didn't work. Excellent. In April 2019, Dorset Council was formed. So while we stayed on the same platform, a huge amount of work had to be done to disaggregate data from different councils and present it as one. Lots of retheming, lots of functional additions around navigation links to help resolve location-based issues. So if you're in West Dorset, you need to know that this is the team you still need to go to without making it too difficult. So a bit of a technical challenge. And now we come to summer 2021, and we have taken the decision to move to a new platform with Placecube. It's part of a wider plan for council transformation work, and it's fitting in very tightly with a contract expiry with our Consensus website. So as you can see, given that timescale, business as usual really hasn't been a thing for us. We've been working flat out for some time. So this was our challenge statement: migrate existing website content and functionality, I hasten to highlight that one, to the new customer platform and use its capabilities to create a better user experience. So that was really keeping an eye to the future in terms of the capabilities we'd need, but focus on immediate needs of moving the content. But we're also looking at this point to make improvements where we could, but minimize this to enable things to move really quickly. So time was of the essence, really. So we made some early decisions on what we would and wouldn't do as part of this project. So we decided to reuse an existing design that came from Placecube as part of their digital place offering. We wanted to use the standard templates that have been user tested, designed for reuse, so that we didn't have to do any significant redesign work and start from scratch with user research. Because so much work had been done on information architecture in 2018, we were fairly comfortable with that. We've had a revisit to make sure, but we're happy that that's the right choice to stay with what we had. And we've taken a choice to reuse the digital place components where possible, rather than design new components if we could. And we wanted to keep focused on just moving content, no rewriting or restructuring, but we wanted it to be an as is. We needed to give users what they had already without detracting from that. And there are a few things we weren't going to do. So along with that minimalization approach, no further user research on what we needed to do. We have done a little bit, which is just about benchmarking performance on the site so we can compare before and after when we've moved. We're retiring our service menu, which I'll show you in a bit, and it's not that common a feature on council websites, and we've found it's not been that easy to use. As mentioned, no content rewrite. We've been through significant overhauls, and we weren't getting a feeling from users that it needed that. We're going to focus much more on that once we migrated across and make it targeted. And we didn't want to do too much on the integration side, again, just to help that migration piece and only focus on things that absolutely needed to be moved in that way. But because we were bringing in new templates and retiring our service menu, we have got some elements that have changed, giving look to a different perspective on what the council looked like on the web. This has also given rise to some issues and some opportunities. So I'm just going to take a quick walk through these to give you an idea. So I always go to this page. This is our, or was our, coronavirus page, which isn't terribly easy to see on here. It's very big if you go looking for it. This pretty much illustrates where we got to. We kind of lost our way from a council that said we are going to have a GDS approach. We've introduced lots of elements that are just not that, with banners, with images, with information cards. This has all happened incrementally over time. It's not been done deliberately, and it's not been done accidentally either. We've just arrived at this point. We found that our service colleagues are increasingly requesting images for navigation. We know that those aren't the easiest things for our users to use. We've got alert boxes. In short, we're making life a little bit harder. And here's another example. This is our bins and recycling landing page, which is a whole lot of grey boxes for people to cope with. So these kind of navigation cards became a sort of prime element alongside our service menu. So we weren't giving our customers a consistent journey either on navigation. So some more issues we'd given ourselves. And here is that service menu. You probably recognize it from Gov UK. So when I say it was our prime but not only navigation, this applied to all but 3 of the levels for our information architecture. So sometimes you see it, sometimes you wouldn't. The list of links shown on this example is fairly minor, but we have had up to 19 links on a menu. So as this wasn't in the digital place list of components and it seemed like a good opportunity, we took that decision to not bring that with us. So here's what a landing page is starting to look like. It's a sneak peek. This is very much a work in progress. We're still working on these at the moment. So now we have multiple levels of navigation through one page. The cards at the top are for the next level down, the categories the next level down, and child pages to that top level of environmental health are at the bottom. We're still working, as you can see, on descriptions, adding descriptions to our cards. This is because our Our service menu didn't have them, so we're finding that there's a lot of gaps, and that's one of the jobs we're having to do during just before we go live. So bear with us. Well, it's not perfect at the moment, but hopefully it gives you an idea of the kind of change in approach that we're looking at in terms of design. We quite like it too. So this is an existing page on the council, the current council website, which is on finding a consultation. This is going to give you an illustration of how things are different but the same. So using that approach of as is functionality, we've gone for reproducing this largely as it is. We haven't got the user research to say we need to change stuff. So what we wanted to do is build something very similar. And this is what we've been able to achieve in, I say we've been able to achieve, what Placecube have been able to achieve given the functionality and the acceptance criteria we put together. So pulling it together to make it a lot more attractive. We've also taken the opportunity here, which you can see, to fix some accessibility issues. So I'll just skip back one so you can see the 1 and 2 here are coloured. On the current site, green means it's an open consultation, red means it's closed. No good if you're colorblind. So what we've done is added a little bit of context there. So this became a design approach, a design feature that we decided on the fly to help our users and improve the accessibility a bit. Looks like GDS missed that one when they scanned us. So I'm guessing you're here to hear more about the migration aspect than you are to hear about me. So it's fair to say I'm going to hand over to Lorna to take you through it, because I think this is as much Placecube's story as it is ours. What I would say is it's really quite ambitious, and I'm going to try and explain that with some context before I give you over to Lorna to go through the steps that were taken. So we're just going to look at the numbers. So there's a lot to take in here. The first thing to say is this isn't one website, it's 2. And what we're not doing is just picking up a load of pages and dropping them into a new site. That would have been a really easy project. I'd have pumped for that one, please. But we've got something a lot different here. One of the websites we're migrating is our public health Dorset website. Nothing crucial there during a pandemic, the idea that we need to move a website containing key things about public health, but those are the challenges we face. And the challenge there, we weren't adopting a new approach, a new design, we were reusing the existing design. So we needed to understand how to do that in Placecube as a microsite. But what you can see is some fairly large volumes of content, but without the need to rewrite that content. So I've got a fabulous bunch of content designers. I think a couple of them might be here this afternoon. They're really good at what they do. The last thing we want to do is waste their design talent by making them copy and paste. And in previous migrations, temp staff have been used with quite variable results. We'll just leave it at that. And I mentioned earlier about the custom development we went for in Contensus. You start to see that in some of these numbers, the 31 content types, the 21 components, the 135 web controls, the 727 contact cards. All this stuff needed to be replicated in the new site. So, and if you took contact cards alone, we needed a way to manage those so that we could, as we do currently in Contensus, we can manage those very easily and get to them to edit. So just to give you an example of that, this council has now decided to make its postal address somewhere different. So we needed to go through and edit all that information. We can do that in Contensus currently, and it's nice to be able to say we can also do that within the Placecube platform. With the approach that we've adopted. So the approach really was to, in the past, has been to create another content type on Contensus whenever we wanted to cater for a non-standard content. So we've amassed a lot of them, and that's part of the challenge that we handed over to Placecube to say, there you go, what are you going to do about that? And Lorna's going to take you through how they cope with that. Lorna, over to you.
Thanks, Neil. I've just mentioned in the chat, if anyone did join afterwards and they have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat window, and we'll answer those as we go through. automatic. So automated content migration. So why a migration? Why do we, as Placecube, recommend the approach that we did? And what are the benefits of those approaches? So when Dorset first spoke to us about their content migration, we wanted to really explore all the options available to them. And we wanted to work very openly and be honest about the pros and cons of each approach that they might choose to take. While doing this, though, we also had to maintain a real view on the costs and other associated resource implications that those could have had with each of the options. So we started to explore 3 routes. One of them was a manual content migration, an automated migration or semi-automated migration. So using an existing tool that we have to deliver the information architecture, which would be followed by a manual content migration. So that's kind of like, the good old halfway house in between the two. And then a fully fledged automated migration, which would bring across all the information architecture and all the associated content, documents, media, metadata, pretty much everything. The third approach would involve us building a whole new migration tool for Dorset, and I'll talk about that in just a second. So as Neil's shown, we did some research. It led us to find, around 4,000 live pages, what Neil said about web controls and numerous content types, etc. And what that data did was it helped Placecube to produce the estimates of manual effort required for each of the migration options that we put forward. So it's hard for anyone to accurately estimate all of the effort that would be involved in a manual migration, as a lot depends on the amount of resource that Dorset would have available, the different skill levels of those people, and also familiarity with the source and target CMS as well. So we worked out an average time for each activity. For example, creating a web control in Digital Place would take approximately between 5 and 15 minutes. So we times that by the number of controls that were in place and needed to come across to get an indication of the time it would take. And we did the same process for creating content articles, etc. And what we determined was manual migration. We all know, a lot of us on this call I've seen and know have been through this process before, and manual migration requires considerable amounts of resource from Dorset Council. I've been through a manual migration, attempted and delivered one, and it was absolutely no mean feat. When I worked at Shropshire Council, we migrated the website from a legacy CMS onto Umbraco. We literally locked ourselves in a room in Shropshire for weeks and weeks on end, and it was really, really hard work, really hard. But having said that, it did give us the opportunity to learn the new CMS inside out. And there was value in going through and analysing all of the content that was on the existing site. But as Neil said, for Dorset, they'd already been through a lot of this process before. So the value they would have seen from that would have been reduced. The second option I mentioned, using the existing and tested import tool that we have, it would have removed the need for Dorset to manually create the pages and layouts in the new content management system, but the content would still have manually needed to be pulled across in the same way as the full manual migration. So the estimate for that was around 983, give or take, days of one person's time, I should say. So the third option was for us to go ahead, work in collaboration with Dorset and build an automated migration tool, which would take absolutely everything from Consensus and automatically bring everything back across into Digital Place. So it removed all the need for any manual effort. And the original estimate that we put on that was around 50 days of effort. That was obviously the one that we went on to recommend and put on the table, which was subsequently agreed. We really did want to cut down the manual effort, and given the really tight turnaround we had with the Consensus expiry, we needed to do something that would fit in with those timescales as well. The other really important part of the migration to Dorset and to our other customers as well is that they're really keen to add to one of our core values, which is all about reuse. And so by building this tool in collaboration with us, it meant that then became available to other customers other potential customers in the future who will then benefit from that as we move forward and attempt further migrations. Next slide, Neil. Okay. So I've already covered a lot of the pains of a manual migration. A lot of us will have experienced it, as I said. So kind of in summary on that, manual migration, it's going to tie up a lot of people for a lot of time. It's going to tie up your web content for a long period of time. And just drawing back to the subject of this, during a pandemic, obviously the last thing that you want to do is impose any kind of long-standing content freeze, because pages across the site is going to change in light of things that are going on with the pandemic. Manual migration, usually sequential, with a sign-off process where you do that and then you move on to the next section. So it's kind of bit by bit. And when all is done, everyone's satisfied, it passes the test, it can then go to launch. And what we did know about this was that Dorset's last migration involved a 3-month content freeze, which was understandably quite painful for the content editors across their organisation at the time. Next slide, please. So with all this in mind, we wanted to give Dorset the flexibility to continue to populate content on their existing CMS, particularly in light of the pandemic. And the aim for us was to cause them the least disruption to the content team and all of the services involved. And this is why at the time we decided with the migration to build in what we call a Delta migration approach. So essentially, the team at Dorset will continue to use their existing CMS to make all of their content changes. And then with the Delta migration, at any point we can go back and pick up the changes that are happening in Contentors on the live website and run a Delta migration to pull those changes across. So what that means for us and for Dorset is that you could push the last migration, the last Delta migration, really, really close to the launch date to ensure that when we do finally flip the switch and say, yes, the website's ready to go live, we have accurate and up-to-date content on there. We can run a Delta migration as often as we need to. You know, it's possible we could do that daily if we wanted to. And we just work with Dorset to identify, you know, the best times in order to run these. But it does allow us to fix issues and update the content as we go. We can run the Delta migration partially, so we don't have to run it and replace the whole site every time. And it has completely, I say completely, nearly removed in entirety the need for any kind of content freeze and subsequent disruption to services. Next slide, please. So how the minimizing of disruption was achieved, well, it's basically through a 3-stage process. So using a set of bespoke tools that we've developed and using API to extract content from the live site and leave it untouched. So the site remains in operation as I've described, and the service isn't disrupted. And then we manipulate the raw output of that and transform it into a state that the Digital Place UAT test site will accept. And that allows for stripping out elements, adding new information, moving content around as required. And then finally, content pushed into UAT, it creates the information architecture and merges with the CMS components. So all of that is hopefully, and I think Dorset will agree, completely minimizing any potential disruption that could have been possible with a traditional approach. So, of course, with all of this, and I always say that our developers are magicians because I'm not hugely technical myself. I have a good understanding, but it always appears to be magic to me. And in the early days, this all sounded fantastic and a little bit too good to be true. You know, no content freezes, everything automated. And I'm thinking, why on earth didn't I have this back in Shropshire Council days? But what we did need to do is provide ourselves at Placecube and Dorset with assurance that this approach would actually work when it came down to it. And so to ensure the magic could happen, the first thing we did was work with Dorset to undertake a technical spike. The purpose of that technical spike was to check out the capabilities of both Contentors and Digital Place. we looked at taking a small section of the website first. So what we chose to do was car parking. We wanted to do that because we wanted to test out our kind of pull push theory to make sure, and that all went through, it was tested and it all worked well. But in the spirit of things, we said, okay, that's worked well. What about something a little bit more complex? What about really testing this? Which is when we said, okay, let's migrate pages. Let's migrate all the pages. So pretty much most of the Dorset site. There was some quirks that came out of that, but it gave both ourselves and Dorset the confidence that we could actually make this work and we could carry off this automated migration approach. So once Dorset gave us the sign off, the tool was developed and iterated to include a lot more use cases and resolve issues as they were identified within the team. And it's important to say that this stage of the process, it was a foundation. It wasn't like we did this and then had to chuck away everything we'd done. So we built the foundation and we continue to build on those foundations with the migration tool. So everything, nothing was wasted. It was all a valuable contribution to the wider migration work that we did. Next slide, please. And then came the reality check, as everyone probably was waiting for. So we absolutely knew none of these options would be perfect, because what is perfect? Nothing's perfect. We ambitiously estimated 50 days to complete the whole migration. However, as we said and agreed with Dorset at the outset, there was a number of unknowns that we couldn't possibly predict or anticipate at the outset. And they have continued to crop up through the life cycle of this project. And it was a risk. It was a risk that we were all signed up to. We were all aware could happen. And it's a bit like ordering, I describe it, a bit like ordering a new dress online. It looks really great on the model. And in theory, it would look really great on you too. But when it gets delivered and you try it on, it's not exactly what you were looking for. So you're either going to tweak it. Maybe in my case, you put some higher heels on to make the dress look a bit longer or shorter or whatever. Or sometimes you just have to go, no, it's not for me. I'm going to take what I've learned from that and I'm going to try and order a new one. And that's very much the way that this has worked throughout the life cycle. So it's a very girly analogy, but I think everyone will sort of get that. And as it happens, and as the graph shows, we're now estimating 120 days to completion. And that's as we now draw into the final stages of the migration project. My honest opinion is that we still firmly made the right choice with that option, given the time it would have taken for manual or semi-automated. And it's an investment in the product. For us as Placecube, it's an investment into our product because we know that we can reuse this and make other customers' lives easier. And I think, Neil, that was everything. So I'm going to hand back to the studio for you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lorna. Thank you for that high heels metaphor too. It's really helpful for me as a bloke trying to get my head around this. So back to reality check number 2, the idea that we wouldn't need a content freeze, which I have to say we kind of went out big time with amongst our colleagues in service teams, saying this isn't going to hurt you at all. The more we've gone through this, and we're going to touch on this a little bit later, the more we realized we couldn't do everything that we wanted to, and there were some things that were missing. If you recall that landing page I showed you, it had some missing text. Well, that's not something auto migration is going to solve. That's something we have to fix. So what we've done to be prudent is we're buying ourselves a little buffer time. We're buying a 2-week period, which is still better than for 3 months, just to make sure that we can finalize everything, make sure everything's working right, because we got such a drastic change in terms of navigation too. We have to make sure those user journeys work. So we're going to do some of that while we're at it. I'm going to go a little quicker so we do get enough time for questions at the end. So I want to touch on doing this during a pandemic, how much of an impact has that had? What has had to happen differently? How do we work on the project that may have been impacted because of it? The short answer is not much. We work remotely, like all you are doing at the moment. I joined the council in October 2020. I've only actually met my team once, and that was on a social occasion. So, we've been managing to work normally, just like everyone else. Without that, we've never actually met Placecube in person. We haven't been on site together. Some of them are, quite rudely located in other countries, telling us how nice the weather is. So it really hasn't had an impact. What we've done instead is use daily stand-ups, proper work plan updates, feedback on work releases, and the usual collaborative tools to make it work. And we've used tools. You've all used tools. There's nothing different here in the list that we're using that we would have done if we'd been in the same room. So nothing really. So really, overall, no great difference. But the timing was the important thing here. The pandemic was all about the timing and the importance of getting information out to the public rather than taking it nice and easy. So this is really the crucial bit for me, is what we've learned. We've had Lorna and I have been going through a huge retrospective really on the whole thing, even though it's still in train. So this is pretty much what we've learned so far, but I think we're all agreed that this is kind of what we feel. So I've already hinted at this. Automation is not a perfect solution. We started out thinking we could save the world, and I don't know how many evenings I've asked for one more beer. It's brought issues of its own. We've had to migrate pages as is. That means that lovely clean design we wanted won't be in operations for all the areas, because the simplest thing is just to move things as they are, looking like they do, just to make sure that we can make sure everything works. We're having to work with some of the quirks. We adapted Consensus to do lots of things to meet the way we'd like to work. So that's actually created some huge headaches for Placecube in terms of working around those. Extra meetings, lots and lots of acceptance criteria, trying to explain why that one thing happens if you push that button. And to be honest, it's been frustrating, seeing things that weren't quite right. Sometimes they only needed the smallest of tweaks, but seeing a problem hanging around for a while, it did give rise to concerns, and we had some worries internally. So it's not been the smoothest journey for either us or Placecube. But as Lorna said, we're really getting quickly to that place where we're starting to feel the sweet spot where things are looking right, they're working right, and we're getting a growing confidence about the ability to go live really soon. And Lorna hinted at this a little earlier. The manual migration actually helps embed learning. My content designers have been used to working in Consensus for years. As a new starter, I could never get my head around it. The roles are completely reversed now, so I'm completely engrossed in Digital Place and the product and LifeRay, and they're finding it a little harder to come on board with that and understand it as well they do Consensus, because of how much work they've put into it. Automated migration is saying, you don't need to know how to do that, we'll do that for you. So it's going to take a little bit of adjustment. It's that using it day after day is going to be what embeds it, and that we'll find more problems and we'll need to solve them. But what we did to actually solve this is just give them extra training. We're also doing things like how-to notes to just get around the hardest things. And we're lucky enough to have a good trainer at Placecube to help us through all that to get past those hurdles. And as we said before, trying something new brings risks. It almost goes without saying. Before we started this project, there were no tools for migrating the content. So that was a risk in itself, trying out something new. We've had to adapt as we go. We've had to make significant decisions on the hoof that we weren't expecting to make. In an ideal we wouldn't have to, but that's been okay. We've got around that. Also, we've been working at pace. When I say we're working at pace, Placecube are working at an increasingly ridiculous pace to try and get things done for us. So we've often not had the luxury of time, the luxury to rethink and restart like we would do if we were doing a parallel migration. We've needed to find a way through. And Lorna, I think that's probably true from the Placecube side. There's been risks on your end, hasn't there?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, we did everything we could to be as open as we could from the outset. And I think the technical spike, and you'll come on to the discovery piece in a second, but the proof of concept, I think it just put everyone in a position where, we were accepting of the risks. We actually felt confident enough to move forward with this as a project. I guess it really it all comes down to having faith in the team that we've got wrapped around this. And when I say team, I don't just mean Placecube, I mean the team at Dorset as well. Got to have that trust.
And as Laura was just mentioning, one of the big learning points, certainly for me, and I think for Placecube too, is we needed to do lots more discovery. We found out far too much as we were going along, particular things, quirks, or features that we had that had been forgotten or misused or just left dormant. We should have documented this far, far better right at the beginning to make things easy. The worst example I came up with while I was thinking about this talk was we actually discovered the version of consensus we had was different to all the documentation in the API. So all of a sudden, just after we said let's go, we had to do a complete rethink and check whether we could actually do all the things we wanted to with the API, given the documentation supplied by our old supplier was completely different. Another one that we found that I didn't know about when we started this was we have some pages hidden from view. Perfectly reasonable thing to do. We don't want to see the pages on Christmas collection bin times during the rest of the year. It's not necessary. So there are ways of doing it, but there are actually 4 different ways of doing it, which created a real headache for Placecube to try and resolve without leaving us in a massive manual task going through page by page and hiding them or deleting them. And it's fair to say we were pretty bad at documenting our requirements initially. And I think it's a fault on both sides. If we'd have had something that said, put your requirements in here in this way, we would have found it easy to move forward. So we've both learned lots on this about how discovery on a project like this needs to be done. But that's why we do retros. The other key thing is we relied on key individuals. We both got key people on Placecube side and my side in Dorset. We relied on a great deal. A lot of work fell on them due to their inside knowledge or capabilities. For me, it was Natalie, one of my content designers, who's got a nice little development streak running through her. She built many parts of the consensus site, and she knows the intricacies of how they work. She just came back from maternity leave, so before we had her around, I don't know how we coped, but now she's here. She's taking a lot of the strain being a part-time worker. And for Placecube, it's the wonderful Dave, lead developer, who was sometimes the only person that could resolve an issue or provide a way forward on a problem. And the other thing in this is in a pandemic, everyone's isolated, everyone's working from home. It's really hard to know how hard people are working or what support they do need. Are they going beyond what's reasonable? I think we probably know that that is the case with Dave, who's worked over weekends and stupidly late into a night. There's this kind of a standing joke now that if something's going to be delivered on Friday, that probably means 3 o'clock in the morning on Saturday because Dave's hacking away trying to get that done. Am I being fair to Dave there, Lorna?
I think Dave, yeah, some of that's the love of the job, I think, with Dave. But yeah, I think, yeah, there has been that time. And as much as Dave for us is obviously key and absolutely critical in this project, I think it's worth mentioning that, you know, we have had other members of the team, you know, actively working on other development tasks. And I think, Neil, we talked about this, you know, the risk of having these key individuals, and in particular a development resource from our perspective. And I guess what we'd say about that is we use so in terms of the code and things, not going too technical because that would be embarrassing for me, but we do use a distributed source control system. So all of the source code is continually shared and backed up. So the development process that we use includes the peer review step where, you know, another developer will carefully review the code that's been written before it's released. That also ensures that we've got that kind of knowledge across the development team. So yeah, should a single developer not become available, then I guess we've had that. And yeah, in terms of Dave, needless to say, we have been in constant contact with him, and we have let him have some lunch breaks along the way. Yeah, and some beers.
I think there'll be more beers to come.
Yes, indeed.
So although we worked in a particularly agile way, the way you would with processes, ceremonies, and tools in place, it's fair to say that looking back on this, there are times when we didn't keep each other in the loop as much as we could. And that goes as much for working within my team at my end. There were times when content designers felt a bit left out because decisions were being made on automated migration tools rather than they were about digging into their knowledge. A lot of that can be put down to working at pace, try and get this delivered in time. We've also not let the rest of our organisation know as much about the project as we could. We're solving that at the moment. We've got a nice big open show and share we're going to do fairly soon to let everyone see the site. Now it's in a place where we're happy to take them around and answer questions. But that kind of working at pace, keeping things to yourself has led to a few misunderstandings. We've had to tell people, no, it's not your website being migrated, it's just these two. And there's been a few frustrations about how do I even create a page. But we've sort of learned that getting it out in the open has helped us appreciate these and reprioritize and focus where needed. And it's good to talk about the good and the bad, to be honest with each other, just so we can walk in each other's shoes and make it work better. And then staying focused on the MVP, it was really, really tempting to say, while we're at it, can we just change that thing and find out that changing that thing would actually be 10 days development work that we haven't got a budget for or haven't got the time for. We had to really pare back to the core what we needed to make migration happen so we can keep to our timetable. So we've pushed some tasks after go live, or we've dropped some work and said we don't need that, things will work fine without. The biggest example for us was the need to undertake redesign on those non-standard pages, the ones we were looking at earlier. We'd have loved to have had extended conversations with service teams and introduced them to the idea of standard templates and designs, but that was going to take longer than probably the few days we would have had to do that and implement something new. So we're going to stick to our as-is philosophy, bring these across, and then take a little longer and do them well. We've also spotted things we'd like to improve as we've gone. There's a list growing on some of the features we've added acceptance criteria for that we've now had to put in a bucket saying next time round. We're logging these on our CMS roadmap and we'll come back and look at those again and assess them against other priorities. So unless it's not meeting an accessible criteria, then it doesn't get done this time round. We will wait for another time. And then this last learning point, which came out of a discussion with Adam, who's here, I think, today. It was after a particularly fraught week where it didn't feel like anything was going well, and I think I was throwing my toys out the pram at the time. And Adam and I had a conversation, and he put his fingers directly on it. This project is about delivering services. It's not about delivering solutions, and it's been very easy to get too focused on delivering bits of functionality to solve complex problems with APIs or integrations and not viewing the website as a whole and its performance as a whole, and the fact that we're giving this to people to use in their day-to-day lives to solve problems. So difficult things like dynamic data lists and configurable search filters, they kind of overshadow the conversation around more simple things like breadcrumbs working or hyperlinks working. So really it was about making sure the site was, when we finished, is better, not just finished, something we're all proud of, as one of the content designers said in one of our agile sessions. And we're getting much closer to that now, so our confidence is growing on how well it will land, and I think we will get to that place very, very soon of where we are proud of our site and willing to let loose on the rest of the population. So that's kind of it from us. It's your chance now to ask some questions. I think I have to unmute you all. No, I don't. I think you could probably unmute yourself. If you've got anything you want to say, you can either drop it in the sidebar. There's a couple of questions on there I'm just going to take. So Neil, might be a silly question, but does 120 person days mean it would take 120 days or to be twice as quick with 2 people working on the migration? I think if it comes to copy and paste, yes, we can drop 7 people on copy and paste and do that quite quickly. But what Lorna was alluding to in some of her stuff was about creating web controls and technical functional aspects of the application. Now, because Placecube is a new product to us, we don't have that capability right now either. That's another thing. So 5 days for a Placecube developer might take 5 months for one of us to properly do. So it was a case of being pragmatic. One from Colin. Hello, Colin. How are those hedgehogs? Do your team read review content? Have they now? I am once again King Hedgehog then. Do we read review content once it's migrated, and if so, are you recording how much time that's taking? So that's an interesting one. So we've been spot checking various things. We've been looking around functionality, but we took a decision just this week actually in the team. We're going to adopt a good old manual migration technique of checking every page, which is going to take us a while, but we've got that 2-week window and it will give us all real assurance as well. So we are going to be checking that. What we found is the problems we found, the issues we found are usually not restricted to one page. So if the bullet points don't look right, they've not migrated properly. Well, that's going to be the case on all the bullet points, or the tables aren't formatted properly. That'll be the case for all the tables. Or some of the content hasn't shown because of the hidden page rule. Well, we need to go back and fix that. So at the moment, we're not finding something that's very, very isolated to one thing, although we did talk through one this morning where, what was it? We found, because of the weird way we store content in consensus within folders, one page had been migrated into one content type, which wasn't expected. We thought it might be another one, but there's a reason for that, because the rules that have been written for the script say, well, if it's in a folder and it's marked as a home page, it gets made into this sort of page. So a few unexpected things, but none of them are things we can't work around or fix ourselves. So that's why we got this extra buffer. Right, I'm talking a lot. Has anyone else got any questions they want to ask? Don't be shy now. Can't see any hands up. Here we go. Thank you, Karen. Karen says, great work. I missed the first few minutes, so apologies if you covered this. Have you any measures of success for work completed thus far? Customer satisfaction, improved accessibility, low dropout rates, reduced customer contacts. Because we're going for a largely, it's a great question, Karen, because we're going largely for an as is, those journeys should be the same ones, so there shouldn't be anything different. What we are doing, we did cover this very, very briefly, is we're doing some user testing on as is and on the new site, so we can do a direct comparison of how well that's working. We're going to be introducing behavioral analytics as well, so we can keep an eye on what people are actually doing on the site, so we can see if things aren't working out for them. And I think it's fair to say, after being in a pandemic for over a year, my content designers love doing user research, and they've been a bit starved of it, so they've really got the taste back. So I think we may have unleashed the beast really, and we'll be going out there and talking to lots more people about our new site and what they like and what they don't. So hopefully we'll get some real measures of satisfaction from real people.
Yeah, and I think as well, Neil, that sorry, just to interrupt, but I think I think, you know, with the wider customer transformation program and looking at that with that view and some of the reuse of existing work that other customers have done, I think that's when we'll start to get into the real kind of the real deep stuff around the measurements and the satisfaction and the improvements there.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a piece of non-migration work we're working on at the moment. How are we going to measure the fact how this website works? So we're doing some work on that at the moment. Delighted to see Lizzie standing. Hello, Lizzie. Was there any review of content before the migration to pick out where things might be out of date? We've got a batch of, I think we last count 83 web editors who are kind of responsible for their own area. So we rely on them to make sure their content is up to date. We've got a few site improved policies that run to make sure things are right. So we do the kind of things we do on a large site with 4,000 pages. We do the best we can, but we do rely on service teams to let us know when things do change. I did spot one just this week. That was a link that doesn't work anymore. So occasionally we make mistakes, but we didn't do any systematic review because we simply didn't have the time. But what we are going to do, we're building in more themed, proactive content reviews. Rather than waiting for something to go wrong, we're going to say, now we're going to take a look at waste and see what works and what doesn't, so that we can really start to improve things with a good base. So not a whole content review. The other thing we're doing is because we're getting quite ambitious with the idea of content design, we're going to be drawing up a content strategy and trying to start implementing that. We're also upping the game on content design by doing the training we're rolling out to web editors isn't just about how to use the platform. It's going to be how to write for the web, because some people are good at one and not the other. So yeah, there's all kinds of things happening as part of the review, but there's lots and lots going on. Cool. Anyone else?
Silence.
Gone quiet. Anything that any of our guests from Placecube want to add? Because we talked a lot about Dave, and I know he's here. No one's asked any of the technical questions, which is awesome for me, because I wouldn't have been able to answer them either.
Silence.
Okay, I'm going to do a countdown from 10, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. No, I won't. Sounds like you probably got what you needed out of it. I hope it's been helpful today. Thanks bucket loads to Lorna for stepping in at hardly any notice to say, yeah, I'll give you a hand with this, to make it a bit more of a rounded presentation than just Dorset says. I hope it sort of represents what we've been trying to do as part of this project, is make it a partnership rather than just supplier and client. And hopefully we'll have something to show you all very, very soon. So thanks very much.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Yep. Thanks all.